So here we go. This is Pray, Love, Serve is the title of our New Year's journey. The importance and meaning of that, I think, will become more apparent as I talk today, and certainly as we go along through the year. This feels like, at least for those of us who are doing our thinking about Christian formation, this feels like in many ways, year two of a journey that began with the year of the Bible just a year ago. But a lot of thinking and praying had been happening for the year before, so in many ways, the thinking and living this notion of our being a pilgrim congregation on our way to discovering what it means to be a 21st century church, a 21st century world, and us as 21st century Christians. I think it was maybe 2 years ago, I did a fair amount of teaching about what I think that language means. Last year we were so busy getting into the Old Testament that we didn't pause for that. So what I thought I'd use today for is to do some talking about what this journey, where this journey fits into our life, what it is, where it is we think we're headed, where it is we think we've been, and then next week we're going to jump right into the life of prayer. But this is a kind of reframing and reminding everyone of this amazingly exciting, complex time Christianity finds itself in, and the church at large finds itself in, and Lord knows the Episcopal Church finds itself in. It's a time when many things that have been assumed to be true and clear aren't working anymore. It's a time of declining attendance in many congregations, thank the good Lord, not in anything like that in our own community, but a sense that something's shifting for people and their openness to faith, and openness to Christian faith. And I want to say a little bit about that today, and again, in preparation for where we're going as we talk about prayer, loving, and serving. What I hope we're going to be able to do in this year is equip ourselves for the living of our faith in a time when most of the structures that support being Christian have been pulled out and taken away. It's kind of us in a secular, largely secular culture with many seductions, many demands, many wonderful things going on. But it has become more and more difficult in many ways for people to both grasp the credibility of their faith and to feel that they are doing it in the company of a fellowship of others who share a set of assumptions. I'll tell you about two people who I regard as important observers of our times. Well, one is a very fine teacher of contemplative prayer called Cynthia Bourgeau. She does teachings all over the country. I had the chance to have a long conversation interview with her at the National Cathedral, but a very wise observer. And part of what she says she's observing as she travels around the church, she's an Episcopal priest, is the numbers seem to be going down in most congregations, especially in smaller congregations and rural congregations. They're going down quite rapidly. Not so much in the city, and certainly not so much in the large churches like ours that have lots of resources and lots of energy for doing what they're doing. But it's a real thing. And so she says she sees those numbers somehow declining, but then every time she offers workshops and prayer workshops and centering prayer workshops, and other people she knows offer workshops and retreats, they're oversubscribed. The people are ready to go off on a retreat, a lot of people are, at a time when many people aren't so sure what it means to be in church and how they're getting fed there. So her vivid line for me that I carried away is, she's not sure whether she is a midwife or a hospice worker. Some days it feels like one, and some days it feels like another. We're in a time of turmoil, and I used an image a year or two ago about this, that it's hard to know in many ways, in a time when things are really roiling and rough and wild and difficult and complex, are we being dragged into something new, or are we dying in the process? And wise people are saying it feels sometimes like one and sometimes like another. Somebody else I've come to admire a lot, J. Philip Newell, who is a Celtic spirituality teacher. I was lucky enough to go on a journey with some clergy colleagues and our spouses a little over a year ago to Iona off the western coast of Scotland, and spent a chunk of time with this amazingly centered spiritual man with a fresh take on what spirituality is and what it's about. And he's one who said that it's hard to tell what's going on in churches these days. He says, I go time and time again to worship in the Abbey at Iona, and so often I see every person leading the worship up front happens to be a woman. And fewer men are leading worship. And he said, after all the years of the men running things, if that feels good, but it raises questions. And they said, then look around congregations, it's not the men so much these days as the women. And he said, worshiping one day in the beautiful Abbey in Iona, this tiny island just off the craggy coast, worshiping there one day, and he saw people going in procession up the aisle, and he said he had this vision that somehow they were carrying a body to be buried, and that it was the church. He's actually a very chipper guy. But then what he said was, but then I remembered that when Jesus was laid in his tomb, the ones who came were the women. And the women came not expecting much to happen but a death and a burial. And out of that came an amazing birth. Something unimaginably life-giving came out of it. Well, I think it's in many ways death and resurrection time. Some churches will die. Others will just find times of questioning and wondering who we are and where we are and how does our faith make sense? How do we live with each other in these times? And there are going to be some times of fresh discovery of new things we're doing, new things we can do. And as I've said time and again in these conversations, we at Trinity are so privileged in this situation of wondering whether we're hospice workers or midwives. We are in the special place of being a highly resourced place. And I don't just mean a beautiful building and financial resources, but in human beings who are bright, smart, quite serious about their faith, willing to take chances, willing to go on retreats, willing to be in conversation, willing to sit down on Sunday morning for a class that's not typical in a whole lot of congregations. We are enormously blessed to be one of those places that can be resources as this time of transformation goes on, as we go through this period of some contraction and a lot of questions and a lot of thinking and seeing some new, fresh possibilities begin to rise for us. So John Philip Newell has a new book called The Rebirthing of God. Speaking of midwifing, I guess. Using the word the birthing of God, not so much like we're going to rebirth God, but if you remember the Time magazine from the 1960s, God is Dead, remember that? Mm-hmm. Nobody was trying to state a philosophical fact when they said God is dead, but an existential fact, that the reality of God seemed to be fading from people's lives. Well, that proved to be patently untrue for the next set of decades. But it's a new time of asking, what is the shape of God's presence? There's no one, at least there are plenty of atheists out there. There's no one I'm talking with seriously about the life of the Spirit who's asking that. But what shape is the life of the Spirit going to take? How are we going to be experiencing God? Things aren't going to change this year or next year or the following year in any kind of palpable way that I can imagine. But where's it all going? And how we can help God do the new thing that God wants to do with the church. We know the church is going to be smaller in general. We know that there are going to be fewer. But can we be liberated in that journey to be more creative, more fresh, more alive? Part of what is said about the life of the church is that every 500 years the church needs to go through a fire sale and unload some of the baggage it's picked up. There was this massive theological breakthrough 500 years ago we call the Protestant Reformation that really redid the foundational understanding of the faith that had been handed to us, that it is about grace and mercy first, not what we can earn along the way. But it was also a time then of our beginning to depend on one particular meaning of communication that had not been thought of before, the movable press, the movable type, the use of books changed the world and changed faith, because all of a sudden those Bibles were going out and put in people's hands, and they started reading those things. And they realized that priests didn't have to read them for them, and they could think fresh ways about them, and they discovered the grace and mercy of God and began to claim that and took on all the structures that were there. It was a revolution of understanding that happened, and it was actually fed by communication. We're in this moment now where we are well into the great communication revolution that everyone is trying to understand. It changes almost by the day. If we could, I think we just got our Time magazine yesterday with on the front of it a picture of a wristwatch that's telling you your pulse. It's telling you how far you've walked that day. It's telling you what your blood count is, and so you can just kind of keep a check all the time. and it is going in many places far beyond that, which is to say, of course the faith has to change. Of course the ways we live our life have to change to respond. Of course we can't hunker down and do what we were doing in the 1940s and 1950s, because the ways we're living really have changed. I have no idea what that means. I have no design and no plan, no sinister thoughts. But I do have a strong conviction that we all want to be loose with each other and figure out what it means, what God is leading us into. I am utterly, utterly convinced that this is of God. This transformation, that God is in it, that God is going to show us new things as Christians along the way, and that we're going to have chances to experience the power and truth of God and the presence of God in our lives in fresh ways by having been given this opportunity. So it's something I want to celebrate, but we are on a different journey for now. So if we're on a journey, what initially is that going to mean? What are we doing with this? And I pulled out a chart that we had a little bit last year. Let's take the one that's either on gray or white paper. I'm not going to walk through all this, but I wanted to give some context. On my way to talking about Prayer Lord Serve, I wanted to give some context to talking about, so what might be the first guesses about what this all means? And for that, if you look at the chart, what we're seeing, we know, is a shift from what's called an established congregation to intentional congregation. I've handed this one out to you once before. But the key point it's making, if you look at it, is a congregation, a church that views itself as comfortably set. Okay, we know how we worship, we know what time, we know what we're doing. If people have the good taste to come, they'll come. If they don't, what the heck? We have our introverted private life, but don't need to talk about it to anybody else. If we can pay professionals to run the show and give a good sermon, and then we can go home and remember it when we want to, and that's what we call a Christian life. If we think that's what it's going to be, it isn't going to work. And so increasingly, and I say this is over the last 20 years, or 30 years really, and it began to be shown even in the 1982 prayer book, 1976 prayer book, that this is a new emphasis on community as the heart of Christian faith. We will not hold on to this faith without each other. This faith cannot be sustained without being in connection with other people who are living with us. And if we have that connection, this faith can be enormously rich and strong and life-giving for us. We're all understanding a different kind of God, a God of mystery, a God of spirit, a God who's within us, a God who moves, a God who works, a God who is alive in our life. And we'll be talking about how we handle God's sightings. How is it that we can, with a straight face and without being embarrassed, begin to say, I think God was in this, or God seems to be doing something here. I think that is crucial for us. The clergy, the paid professionals, all of them are meant to be the encouragers and the equippers, but not the final resource people. One of the things I utterly believe is it's the job of Trinity Church to equip the community to take responsibility for their own spiritual lives. That's our job. To give you the equipment to know how to read the Bible, how to pray, how to practice this faith in a set of ways. That's our job. It is not our job to do it for you, to do the outreach for you, to do the praying for you, to do the learning for you, but to have a community of empowered, eager, committed, alive, questioning, engaged Christians in this community. That's so much. This is not new for us. It's happening, but that's what the vision is. This is exactly what we're headed for, what we're headed to be about. And we need a strong sense that our energy coming together, energizing us, is then sending us out. One of the big breakthroughs in what's being talked about church these days is it isn't fundamentally about our doing the best we can to put on a good show and invite new people into church. It's for us to put on what we believe, what we hope to be will be an inspiring, winning, moving, enlightening, stretching experience of worship, so that we can then go out beyond the walls and see God in action there and respond there. And maybe along the way some people might want to come join in what we're doing when they're impressed enough by what we're doing. The classic Luke 10, a statement of Jesus when he sends his disciples out 2 by 2 to proclaim the kingdom of God, has become much more the banner for the church these days than the last part of Matthew when it just says, go into all nations and make disciples, baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Yes, we're called to proclaim, but what we need to also do is put ourselves with vulnerability at the hands of the communities and people who are inviting him. So much more. Jesus was a risk taker. Those disciples were risk takers. He said, go out and hang out with them, find a bed if you can, get somebody to give you some food, and tell them about this love that won't stop, and that will welcome you no matter what, and will work to heal you as well. The line I used from last Sunday's sermon, I won't take you through another sermon, but I was captivated myself, as you could probably tell if you heard it, with a line from this pastor, John Wimber, who's evangelical, quite fundamentalist pastor who'd gone through a very difficult life himself, became enchanted when somebody gave him a Bible to read. He started reading these New Testament stories, and he said, man, this guy's walking on water, and he's healing people, and he's turning loaves and multiplying loaves. He's doing all this great stuff. I want to do that. And then he started going around churches and turning up a service and going up to ushers and saying, excuse me, can you tell me when you're going to do the stuff? and the ushers would be confused. I know ushers hear a lot on Sunday morning, but this guy come around and said, they said, what stuff? He said, you know, the stuff that's in the Bible. You know, healing and multiplying loaves and spreading the presence of Christ around. And he and Wimber said, no, you've got to understand. That's what it's about. It's the stuff. And then the usher said, well, you're not going to get that here. We believe in it. We talk about it. We just don't do it. And so the core of our journey is to do the stuff. And that's what Pray, Love, Serve is about. It's actually to look at what the basic stuff is of what people have to do to experience, not have to do, what people, what are the basic practices for helping us experience the presence of God and the love of God and the energy of God in us. And so this is a year, I hope, of our practicing doing this stuff. And we went looking for the core stuff to do that. That stuff began with this kind of analysis. What is the stuff we've been doing? What's the way we need to do to go forward? But then if we want to do this intentionally, we need to ask ourselves a set of questions. So pull this out for a minute. The green sheet, and I won't go through all of this, but I want you to have a sense. 10 shifts for the 21st century church. 10 shifts that churches, I believe, have to make to move from a church that's been around for the last 50 or 100 years to a church that's nimble and ready to move in fresh ways. So big picture, let me just go through the titles. From a club to a movement, from a sense that we are our own, we're Trinity parishioners. We're smart, and we have fine aesthetic taste, and we love our building, and we have also much fun when we get together to do things. It's our wonderful club. You can join us if you hang around a bit. To a sense that God is at work in the world, and God has called us to be part of something. That there is a movement from the heart of the cosmos to draw people into healing and wholeness with each other. And that movement took on flesh in one life, in one place and time. And out of that flowed a whole stream of energies we call the church down through the years. And sometimes they get it, and sometimes they lose it, and sometimes they would need to reclaim it. And so for now, this is our time of claiming our place in a movement of spreading the love of God and Christ in our own lives and in our community. Movements stay nimble. Movements make mistakes. Movements go forward and they go back. But movements also know that something big is going on in their lives and can trust that they're being led in a significant direction. And so, just to give you an example, we're here with us from club to the movement. These are questions we could ask. Do we as Christians have a sense that we're called to be part of God's movement to help and heal the world? Do we sometimes see in our life at Trinity a tendency to think first about comfort and traditions of what we cherish from the past? Not here, but other places. Are we a community open to new thoughts and possibilities? So, second, to move from tourists to pilgrims, and then to that dreaded word, disciple. Someday, just as we've gotten used to some other words, like community around here, or we might even try on disciple, the sense that we're actually learners. We're following a spiritual master who knows the moves and knows the practices and can actually come into our life and help us to make those moves. So are we going to, can we sense that our life is a movement and a journey deeper and deeper, that we're finding our way and discovering more? Third, from welcoming to inviting, we talked about that a little bit. From open doors to hospitality to the stranger. It's very much the same thing. It's one thing for us to be nice to everybody who comes. It's another to move out of our doors and engage the city, build relationships, and see what new, fresh possibilities emerge from there. From privacy to testimony, and this is going to be part of our year's journey. Can we actually find regular ways to talk our faith with each other? So much of a transforming thing about faith is you may hear a lot of faith talk on Sunday, faith talk in the sermon, faith talk in the liturgy, all of that. But at some level, if you don't put that language to use in your own conversation and realize what the holes are and what you don't understand, it doesn't become real. The great gift of the DOC program, and we're doing DOC again, Disciples of Christ Community again starting in January, but the great gift is you hear a lot of talk for 45 minutes, and then you're in a group where you can practice talking yourself, get the language, and be open about where you are, where your struggles are, where you need Christ in your life, where you want to be in being part of this community. So moving away from our cherished Brahmin privacy, it's in the DNA, but it's fading, to a desire to be able to speak from the depths of who we are to each other in context. And a lot of this, of what we hope to happen this year will be that as well. As we pray, as we love, and the love part is about our growing and being community with each other, understanding how to listen, support, and grow together with each other. Then from compassion to justice, we've been very much involved in that. There's still more to go with our work against the prevalence of guns in our world and a great many other ways. There's a lot going on there that will continue. From pew rent to sacrificial giving and stewardship, we'll talk more about that later. From saying prayers to praying, and that's what we'll talk about next week. To move from saying some prayers and hoping somebody hears to beginning a communion and a conversation with God. And most helpfully to know what that is and what that isn't. What expectations are real expectations and what are probably not the most helpful. So we're going to be talking a lot about the practical pieces of how to find your vocabulary and your style and your practice for actually engaging the mystery of God and to know that God is real. So that will be part of the praying part. From education to formation, you're here because you get that. It's nice to have interesting classes on different parts of what's happening in the world and the Christian faith. Critical for us, with no time to be wasted, is forming ourselves as equipped 21st century Christians. So that's where we're spending our time. And from attending church to heartfelt praise, I'll be talking in the journey when we'll talk about prayer, talk about the whole practice of being in worship and what's trying to happen there and how do we get in the way of it and how can we open the channels for it. Worship really wants to take us somewhere, help us to see different things and feel different things. So we'll spend some time talking about that as well. So those are the critical steps, and so if you're ever wondering why we're doing the things we're doing around here, here it is. Can't say you didn't get an explanation. You still may not like it, but at least we're not just making this stuff up. We're trying to give all this some careful thought. I want to point to a couple of these passages in here and then turn to pray Lord's Prayer. These each give a fresh take. So let me just read the first one. These are all challenges to our sort of self-perception, where we are and what we're being called to be and to do. Dwight Shiley, by the way, I urge everybody to read People of the Way. We recommended it 2 years ago. It's the best book I know. It's about the only book, but it happens to be a wonderful, easy, 130-page read. It gives the whole context of what's happening in the church, what's happening to the Episcopal Church, and some of the ways the Spirit's calling us forward. So I heartily commend that to you. John Philip Newell has this book, The Rebirthing of God. It's I'd say it's a wee bit heretical here and there. And that happens to Episcopalians from reading things. And so it's a fresh book. It's a fresh, thoughtful. It's a little oversimplified, but he's trying to give a very simple, very fresh sketch of what he thinks, of where he thinks the presence of God is starting to manifest itself and call us forward. So I wouldn't put all of my theological marbles in this, but it's a fresh thought. It's a fresh take and a stimulating one. So those two I do recommend. So Dwight Shiley wrote this first one. Anglicanism offers a rich, textured Christianity with ancient roots, expansive sources, a living commitment to justice and reconciliation, and space for people to explore, question, and grow along the way. It embodies the wisdom of centuries, not just the latest fads. These are the good things he's saying. At the same time, it is inhibited in many places by traditionalism that obscures the power of its traditions, by elitism that restricts its treasures, and by a lack of theological and spiritual clarity and urgency that would fuel a renewed sense of purpose. I'll stop there. You get the cherished gift we carry as Episcopalians, and you get the challenge of having that be part of what can feed and energize us and not what can keep us stayed and stuck in a very old and familiar way of thinking. Brian McLaren, who's been, he's spoken the last few years here at Trinity sometime, maybe one of the very best, freshest observers of what's happening in the larger church, a lovely, lovely man full of creativity, who wanted to become an Episcopal priest, and the bishops told him he had to go back and do a whole lot more schooling than he thought appropriate. So he became a non-denominational pastor in the Washington, D.C. area, did a beautiful job, but has become so wise about what's happening in the broader church. He's written a series of books. Generous Orthodoxy is a great book if you want to read it. But here's what he says about our denomination that he did not become a part of. I see in the Anglican Communion a store of theological, spiritual, and relational treasures that could create space for millions of people who are currently increasingly disaffected from conventional Roman Catholic, Pentecostal, and mainline Protestant life. And to me, even more significant, Episcopalians could create space for a wave of spiritual seekers who feel the call of God toward transformation and mission, but can't find a welcome into existing institutions. Yet, the Episcopal Church faces challenges. I believe that this time of internal stress could bring the Episcopal Church into a point of willingness to make needed change and innovation that could be historic, but the window could easily be missed. And the last one, I won't read all of it, it's another celebration of our beautiful liturgies, but says at the bottom, but don't forget practicing the faith. Religion is a practical discipline that teaches us to discover new capacities of mind. Okay, so now let me shift to talking about where we're going from here. We had a very fine, very thoughtful Christian formation task force that met for many months. And led by Mary Renner and Ralph Cole. It was a terrific journey we were on together. We were reflecting on what our experience had been in the year of the Bible. I think most of us felt a lot of enthusiasm for that, and a real sense of joy and discovery, a little overwhelmed by all the information coming at us. Also overwhelmed with gratitude to Bill Rich for all the amazing postings he put in. It made such a difference for us. It was just a great journey. And even though many of us felt like we were drinking out of the water hose, we might have gotten a little water along the way that could help us and has laid a foundation. So thanks be to God for that whole journey. At the end of it, everyone felt, and certainly the task force felt, that, okay, that's been great, but it also sort of took over every inch of parish life for a year. And a lot of other things couldn't happen or get talked about because of how important and central this was. So we decided to create a looser year this year and a less academic year this year, knowing that we have every expectation of finishing the journey in the Bible, I hope next year, but that's something to be determined beyond. And so this became the year to go practical and to go nimble and to allow room for a set of different things to happen in our life as needs be, and then to focus in on the ways we actually will move beyond good ideas in our head, good understandings in our thinking, to being inside of and experiencing the love of this God in our lives and in our world. And so we took up what we call these practices, and we went for what seemed to be the three core practices. Not Eat, Pray, Love, which is another book, but Pray, Love, Serve. And to work at what it really takes for us to make our own intentional journey. In order for this faith to become real for us, and believe me, I'm assuming many of you have your own practices in different ways. I'm not pretending anywhere that we're all starting for the first time. But I found myself as a prayer often needing to start again and again. The practice I'm doing starts fading and it falls away, and I'll have to pick it up and start something new again. But finding a way for us to help each other discover how to do that most personal and often elusive, frequently confusing thing called prayer. And so we're going to spend the first chunk of opportunities in coming Sundays, although there's some other things happening on some of the Sunday forum periods, doing a deep dive with the practice of prayer, talking about what's going on when we pray. Why is it that it feels like I'm talking to myself and there's nobody on the other end? What's going on and why is that so? And what are the practices that can help me begin to experience what authentic prayer, or authentic's not fair, but all prayer can be authentic, but intentional prayer trying to go somewhere. how can I find my way there? How can we share some of that with each other? People can talk about prayer forever and read books about prayer forever. I've done both, and not prayed as much as we're called to pray. And so a little bit as we gather, and in opportunities we're going to be offering along the way, we're going to try to create some possibilities for times for prayer of different kinds. I don't know what exactly that will look like. Many years ago in a place called Trinity Church, I was offering a noon centering prayer event for a whole stretch of time. We're going to look for ways at odd times, evenings, afternoons, Sunday afternoons, some retreat time, probably bringing over one or two of the brothers from the Society of St. John the Evangelist along the way, other teachers of prayer. But for the whole purpose, not of having you be very informed and sophisticated about Ignatian prayer and centering prayer and the rest, but to help you find your foothold, your way, something that works with the way your spirit leads, and to be able to do it some and then come back and talk about it with somebody and get some sort of reflection and help and encouragement along the way. So that will be where we begin. We'll be focusing a great deal on that. When we talk about the journey of love and community, that is not going to. We probably will have a forum or maybe two talking about skills for being in community, like active listening and other things. But the heart of that is doing it. The heart of that is our saying this is a year for our getting in community and being in conversation and connection with each other. We're already planning a wonderful set of gatherings during the stewardship season to come together in people's homes around. But we're also thinking about some more reflection time in the winter, maybe in Lent. Maybe something for all the weeks of Lent, a night for people to come together in prayer in some way. So all of this is still very fluid, and we're going to be needing to talk to people along the way about how we put that piece together. Bill has got lots of creative ideas. We're just talking about that. We're going to have one book to recommend strongly to you and a whole set of other options, but we're going to wait and talk all about that next week. I'm sorry, that's about prayer. On this one, we haven't found the ideal book, but we're looking. I love Dietrich Bonhoeffer's book, Life Together. That's what I'm looking at to see if that might be something some of us might want to read with each other. Pray, love, serve. Sometimes it's the easiest and sometimes it's the hardest thing to do, to find our way to be Christ's minister. For some of us, that may necessarily be right inside our homes where things demand the best of the Christ energy that we have. Right? For some, it can be making it through a work day when things are complex and there's nothing very Christ-like going on there. And my ministry is to stay in this place as an agent of God's presence as best I can. But we hope it can be big and ambitious too, that we look together at ways to be in one-on-one ministry, whether it's feeding ministries or prison ministries or tutoring ministries or encouraging, challenge young people in our city ministries. We're going to be exploring ways to make a panoply of suggestions. That's all we can do. It's between you and the Holy Spirit where you go and what you do. But to try to offer those possibilities for you, to try those out and see where they might take you. And to help you weave all that together, you have your very own custom manufactured Trinity Journal. These are free. There'll be a hot item on the market soon. Amazon's already written me about them. But for now, you've got your very own. And it's given both in hopes that it's small enough for you to pop it in your briefcase, pop it in your purse, carry it around. And I suggest, we'll talk more about this, to record stirrings of the Spirit. Is there something that spoke to you in worship today, or something spoke to you here, or some yearning, or some desire, or something that interests you to pursue? Try to capture something of the stirrings that happen. Ideally, bring it when you come week by week, but that's easier said than done. But to find some way to be intentional about what's happening to you. You know, one of the realities is amazing moments happen to us in our days, And we know they're amazing at the moment, but then we keep moving on and never circle back to claim them. The holiest part of Ignatian spirituality is what they call the examine. At the end of every day, to look back and look at what God was saying and doing in the course of the day. Well, that's not, this can't be all of that, but it can certainly be a way for you to pause and reflect and think about what's going on. And if nothing else, this can be a reminder sitting around the house for you to do that. So I commend it to you wholeheartedly. And lastly, I'll say one thing, and then let me stop here and let's take about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. See if there's a question right now or a thought about where we are before we launch off. We have a couple of minutes. Yes.
This is practical. Will this be on? I'm Ann Elvins, and I'm just hoping that you will put this also online so that if some of us don't get here, we can see the videos like we did last year.
I trust so. Pat, yes.
That's the plan.
Yes, that's the plan. That's the plan. Good. Yes.
Sam, my name is Beth. The first thing I thought of when I saw this little booklet was the privacy of testimony. Has there been any discussion perhaps about doing a blog as well? Because one of the things I often find outside of church is I'm not always necessarily talking to people during the week, and I keep a journal, but journals by their very nature are closed books. And is there any way we can use social media for those of us who are writing in our journal to also share with each other during the week when we're not physically with each other?
May I introduce you to Pat Hurley? Pat, why don't you say something about the table?
Yes, actually, we are launching an online private network for the parish. It's called the Trinity Table, and it's actually already up and live for people who are testing it, but if you'd like to start joining it now, you're welcome to do so, and I'm happy to provide information. But starting in October, we're going to encourage everyone to sign on, and the purpose of it is to inspire and encourage discussion on all sorts of topics within the parish, so I'm hoping that you will use it for that. Thank you for asking.
That's a great answer. What was the question? The question was, can we put a blog, get the blogging here, so that, very nice way to put it. We write in a journal, we write it there, and we put it away.
Use of social media.
How can we communicate with each other, which is, of course, absolutely right. How can we be fellow travelers, fellow companions? And, frankly, I have a priest or two of friends of mine who do blogs that are quite personal, and I read them every week because they're stirring and energizing for me. And if we can be doing that for each other, that would be a wonderful thing, and it looks like we're going to be doing that.